Thank you so much for coming tonight. The turnout is absolutely incredible, which is great news because the cause is really important. If you don't mind going to the next slide. Tonight on the agenda, we're going to be covering first a welcome, introduction to PASE and the committee, so you can learn a little bit about who we are, the folks that have dedicated a tremendous amount of time to doing some legwork for our community. Considerations for the audience and feedback to date. So we've already held a listening session, for example, so we've heard from residents. There's some consistent messaging that we can share with you that I think will be helpful. And of course, tonight we look to get your feedback with a question and answer session to follow this particular presentation for about 30 minutes, but also certainly with all the subject matter experts out in the other hallway. Please ask questions, be curious tonight. That's exactly what this is about. Lastly, just a couple more things. We'll share some key learnings to date. So PASE was put together to do a lot of research, to do comparisons to other communities, to see how we spend our money, how our revenue is generating. So we're going to share some of that information with you. We want to talk to you about the impacts and then try to bring it all together with a good closing. So with that, a sincere welcome. My name's Tom Broussard. I've been in the town with my family since 2007. We've raised our family here. We really love our community. I've been on the Finance Committee. I've been on the Select Board. I'm the current chair of our Community Preservation Committee and the current chair of the PASE Committee. So really excited and happy to be here. I want to say thank you, certainly not just to you folks for being here and sharing your time with us. Thank you to all of the PASE committee members, without a doubt, for all the effort that you folks have put forth and invested on behalf of our residents. I'd like to say thank you certainly to Mr. C in the back, orange shirt, super happy for hosting us here tonight at Blanche James. Just, you can put it together for him. I saw somebody, so if you don't know Mr. C, you should go say hi. He has incredible energy, and he is the person who oversees as the principal here at Blanche James. What a beautiful place to have our meeting tonight. I think it's fitting. This demonstrates firsthand where we as the residents of Easton have decided to invest in our community. And we have one of the most incredible schools in this state, and I would certainly put it up against many other states as well. So please make sure you look around and look at this school because this is what we're focused on as a priority as a community. Next up, certainly thank you to DPW, thank you to all the town employees, thank you to all the school employees for making tonight possible. So they came, set up these chairs, turned over the day very quickly. It's almost like Boston Garden when they would flip from a day hockey game to a Celtics game at night. Just an incredible amount of coordination and effort. So thank you all so much. Thank you to ECAT for publicizing this and enabling other people at home to also listen in. So it's appreciated. Tonight's goal is to honestly and genuinely try to share with you a volume of information that we will not be successful sharing. The volume is simply too great. We have spent over 1,000 man and woman hours doing research, compiling presentations, pulling spreadsheets, comparisons, information, turning over rocks, boulders, everything in between to make sure that the recommendation that PASE gives to you is something that we believe in firmly, that is backed by data, and that you folks can hopefully understand, digest, and use to be informed at May of 2025 town meeting, because that's when this all comes to a head. So again, we want you to be informed tonight. We want you to ask questions as we get to that, and then that way 2025 meeting can be as good as possible. The other thing, the pictures on the screen are fitting. Candidly, they embody the values and the priorities that we as residents have set for our community. There can be no mistaking that. I think if you look at them and you see the historical context of our community, if you look at the educational building and the school system that it represents, if you look at Langwater Farm, which is an area of farming and open space, and you look at how we have decided to invest in value, a budget reflects that. So how we choose on May of 2025 to vote and what we choose to do will be a direct reflection of what we hold as important and the values we wish to show. So that's why I thought these pictures were beautiful. Certainly the town pool, they are what makes Easton what it is. They are what makes Easton a community that people want to move to. Our home values have outperformed, that we are a location in a community that people deeply like to move to. So that's, when I look at it, why I wanted to start with this picture and show you just who we are, and that's what we're talking about. We are here as residents to take ownership of the decision that's going to be made in May. PASE is a resident-led community committee that is designed to really reflect back and recommend what we think you folks as residents want Easton to do come May. So with that, I'll pass it over to my good friend, Vice Chair Nancy Donahue.
Thank you, Tom. I also love this slide because it really reflects my 29 years of living in Easton, raising our 2 daughters here, working in the Easton Public Schools for 20 years, which I've just retired from, and now find myself on this committee, another way to serve this town, which has been amazing. I'm also on the Ames Free Library Board, so I look at these historic buildings, particularly the library here and the huge renovation that we've committed to, and you've also been part of that with the CPC funds committing to the new roof and the things we're doing to that. So yeah, this should make us all smile. What I'd like to talk about are our goals for this evening. As Tom said, I'd really like you to feel welcome here. I'd like you to feel empowered to be part of this conversation and part of this decision making. And I'd also like you to get information so that when it comes time to vote, you can make the vote that's right for your household. And I want to begin with that information, telling you what's going on in Massachusetts. And I probably am not telling you anything that you're not aware of from the news. Some of the things that Easton is facing are very much the case in other communities as well. These enormous inflation costs, over 20% in the last 2 years in our insurance costs. The fact that the aid we were given during COVID, things called ARPA and ESSER funds to the schools and to towns for emergency recovery are expiring this year, and yet the needs for those are still very, very real. And finally, we find that we are in a minimum aid school district. Now, Easton has been in that for years. It's been one of our challenges for many years. In fact, what that minimum funding means is that we only get $30 per student. Sometimes we get a little more than that, but that's what's supposed to be granted to a community like ours. Now, lately, you might be hearing in the news that up to 3/4 of the communities, over 3/4 now in Massachusetts, are in this situation. A very sad situation. It gives me a little hope, though, that the advocacy that's already happened at the state level by our town folks and school folks will have an even stronger message with other communities. So maybe we'll see some relief or change in that, but that's not going to happen overnight. As you know, that takes years for legislators to make any change in that. So as a result of that, you see this phenomenon of override doubling in the most recent years, where from full year 14 to 23, there used to be 287 overrides statewide, sort of 28 attempts a year. In 24, there were 62. There's already been 46 attempts to date. This is what we're going to see in this state as long as this municipal organization that we have continues. Among 10 Massachusetts towns that have a similar profile to us, which means we look at the residential and commercial tax split, the population, our total revenue, Easton has gone the second longest without an override. It was 19 years ago that we had an override that passed. How many of you were in the town at that time? Yeah, it's been a long time. And some more information about what's going on at the state level. So, as a result of these issues, which were not new, they're not new for this year. We've been talking about this. The town administrator, superintendent of schools has talked about this in their budget presentations for years. It's almost amazing that this town has been able to keep this at bay for as long as we have. COVID helped us a little bit with those funds. But at the town meeting last May, there was a real effort to try to discuss what was going on with the budget. And so voters actually approved this committee, this PASE committee, PASE standing for Promoting a Sustainable Easton. And you see the committee members sitting in front of you here. And really take a look at their names. They're your neighbors, they're your friends, they're professionals who are working in all of the areas of the school and town government. and make sure you're connecting with those of who you know afterwards. PASE was charged specifically to look at 3 areas. How do we fix our revenue shortfall? How do we spend our money? And as Tom said, how does our budget impact our services? What are our goals? What are our values here in Easton? And how do we spend our money to achieve those things? As Tom said, PACE is a recommendation committee. We are not going to make a final decision. We're going to pass our recommendation to the select board, who will either adopt it or amend it or do what they see fit. And then that will be brought to the town meeting in May. And if the voters decide that we would like to talk about an alternate budget that's not balanced with cuts, but that rather is balanced with our override recommendation, then that also has to go to ballot. So it's residents, it's town folks, it's voters who will make this decision. As Tom mentioned, we've had other opportunities to engage on this topic. On January 8th, we had a presentation at Queesit House. I recognize a few of you from attending that. We hope to have sort of maybe 10 or 15 folks getting interested in this issue, and we had over 70 at that. And these are the questions that we asked folks. What do you think we should celebrate about Easton? What are the challenges that we have in Easton? And then what would you tell someone who's thinking to move to Easton? And you probably are not surprised at so many of the things that were said, particularly on the celebration side. Green space, an emphasis on conservation, great public safety service, good schools, beauty, history, and our library. On the challenging side, folks were very articulate about permitting, the time that it takes, the difficulty in starting new construction projects, the lack of affordable housing, the fact that there's no public transportation, and that the conservation laws are strict. So it doesn't take a lot of thought to draw a conclusion that some of those things are at odds with each other, particularly green space and conservation laws as compared to the opportunities for new construction, affordable housing, and large housing projects. And it's not that one of those are right or wrong, but you can feel the sort of tension that exists with the decision making that occurs in town whenever we have projects that cross some of those policies. So the current condition that we face, and what we really have a consensus among PACE that I think is amazing. When you look at the variety of perspectives, the diverse professional backgrounds that people bring to PACE. We have spent 50 hours in meetings together studying this since August, and then as Tom says, countless other hours. We get homework between every meeting. We're researching, we're studying, we're collaborating, we're preparing these open houses. There's a lot that's happening, and for a group this diverse to come together with an understanding that this challenge is $8 million, that's what we're facing in this town. You'll hear higher numbers in other towns, you'll hear some lower as well. And the consensus for PACE is that it's going to be a revenue solution with $7.2 million coming from a possible operational override. And the difference, $0.8 million, through cuts on the expense side. The issue, our challenge for Easton is we run very lean. And that has been proven not only through an audit in 2017 when the last override attempt failed. There was a decision to have a town audit to check to see how things were going. And that cost the town some money, but validated that things were running very lean. And I can say again, validated by this group over 50 hours of studying comparisons to other towns. That in every area, we are either in the middle or very, very low on many ends of our spending. So the revenue will be necessary, as I said, because we're rolling off these COVID relief programs. We continue to get very weak support from state resources. And this is a kind of a unique thing to Easton. 1/3 of our town is either non-taxable or minimally taxed. Green space, conservation land, wetlands, Stonehill College, a nonprofit religious institution, things that we love in town. You know, I love going to Borderland, but we know that we face issues then with not having a taxable base there. And the other thing is, because of how lean we run, the majority of our expenses are headcount. Average of 85%, up to 90% in some of our departments, are people. your neighbors, other residents, friends, people who are working in public safety, people who are working in the schools. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about expense reduction. On the revenue side, this is, as I said, this is not a new problem. This problem has existed for a while and is particularly exacerbated by what we call Proposition 2.5. The fact that the law requires or only allows taxes to be increased by 2.5% each year. So of course the override is the process that would increase that. 32% of Easton, I mentioned, is non-taxable, and because we are a residential forward community, you know, people live here because they love the fact that there's a huge residential base. 72% of our tax base comes from residents. We bear the burden of this tax base. Let's see if there's anything else I want to mention here. Tom, anything at this point that you want to add?
No, I think you covered it. I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with Proposition 2.5 that was put in place back in the early 80s, if I remember my timing correct. But essentially, that's a state mandate that says that our revenues for property tax can increase a maximum of 2.5% each year. And we have been doing that. The challenge is, as we all know, inflation has outpaced and outpassed 2.5%. And we love our residential forward community. But that also means our largest piece of revenue is associated with something that is fundamentally capped at a rate lower than expenses are going up. We have examples later on of how incredible our leadership has done and our community has done at trying to find savings along the way. But clearly it's just not enough over time to continue to offset that. And the state knew that. They knew and have prompted with most of their actions that communities can solve their revenue problem if they so choose. So the fact that we're a minimum aid community and get minimum increase to our revenue, for example, the fact that unrestricted government aid for Easton, dollar-wise, not even adjusted for inflation, is below 2008, the state is in effect saying you communities either do with less or you solve it your own way, we gave you a tool. It's a simple equation of math that revenue less expenses have to balance at a town level that can't take on its own debt. We're not the federal government in that way. And so from that perspective, while it's a simple equation, it's incredibly difficult to balance when you have an expense structure that for the police department, for example, is 94% people. And for all of us who either run our household or are in business, we know you still have to turn the lights on and have utilities. You still have to get the kids to school on a bus. There are just other fixed expenses that are pretty small that almost can't be changed. So no, Nancy, I think you covered it. Prop 2.5 is a really big principle though for us.
Thank you. And the one other point I want to make about this slide is, you know, we haven't been standing still. Residents like you have supported smart growth in so many areas, like the new sewer districts that have allowed additional businesses to come in. Avalon, our largest taxpayer, affordable housing, giving folks alternatives to live in this town, to move to this town. So this town has supported these things, and we just need to continue to take advantage of those opportunities. As Tom started to talk about, state aid, which is the second largest portion of our revenue, but yet it's only 13%, whereas in 2008, prior to that recession, it was 25% of income. We still haven't come back from that huge change. And here's a little bit more information about the Chapter 70 minimum state aid for schools. $30 on each new student. I mean, we hate when we lose pupils in the school. We want pupils in the school, but look at that kind of per student cost. We run with smaller budgets in our school than any of most of our neighboring towns. We'll talk more about that as well. And even with that, historically, that $30 has meant like $100,000 on a revenue of a $50 million public school district. It's like a drop in the bucket. Okay, so what I want to do now is kind of let Tom start to address a question that continues to come up from folks, and that has to do with the new public safety project. People are asking, why can't we just move those funds from that public safety project to our operations to try to address this. So we wanted to explain that for a minute.
Thank you so much, Nancy. One of the things I wanted to say at this slide before I dive into the detail of a debt versus operational is to remind people that we didn't do anything inherently wrong. I just want to make sure you know that we're not here because we fundamentally misspent, or we did projects that didn't hold value, or we've been driving revenue up so much through all the ways and we haven't spent it thoughtfully. So although we're here for a tough discussion and the topic is tough, the fact that we're having it now is heartening. This is a good thing tonight, to be able to have this discourse and this conversation. Because the reality is we run lean, we ask a lot of our residents, and we try to put it to great use. And hopefully you'll see that by the time we finish the presentation tonight. Debt versus operational override is important. So an operational override, we were talking about earlier, to try to solve our fundamental operating budget this year, that's money that will always stay on the tax levy. So if we as residents vote to increase how much tax we pay, it stays there, and it every year becomes added to our tax base. So it's a fundamental step up. A debt override exclusion is different. It is a specifically earmarked set of override monies for a project, i.e. Bland James. So we all get together, we agree that we need a new school system, a new school, and we fund that by taking on debt, and once it's paid off, that rolls off our taxes. So for example, RO rolls off in 2 or 3 years, if I remember correctly. 2, perfect, right? So that's a defined amount, and then our taxes get reduced by the fact that that project has gone away. It's like financing the roof. Once it's done, it goes away. The reason why it's important to bring it up is, we know we just did a project last year, a meaningful one for public safety. We know several years back we did Bland James, for example. I can assure you, very thoughtful investments. It helps take a lot of expense, repairs and maintenance, or capital expenses for old buildings that were built in the 60s, for example, that might have had asbestos or other things that need to be taken care of or not ADA compliant. All those good things. I can assure you the money we've invested in those projects is good money. The fact that it happened last year, some of the feedback that I've gotten is, but didn't you know? And it's a great question. Didn't you know that we were going to have a challenge, right? That an operating challenge. Why is it back to back? A couple things. In 2013, we as voters asked for an assessment of our buildings overall for the town-wide to make sure we were thoughtfully planning ahead which ones need to be replaced and when. So now fast forward, we certainly fund Dore and Whittier, committed their report, 2014. The Buildings Committee, Planning Committee adopts which building order they wanted to prioritize a couple of years after that. We then say in 2019 we want to begin doing a study about the public safety building. We expect 2021, we looked at the results and we expected in 1 to 2 years to be coming back to you to replace that building. I give you that timeline because normally big projects like this in communities and towns take years. And so the planning doesn't always align with when we start to incur, in this case, operational challenges to our expenses, like the last 2 years having such high healthcare costs that go up year after year, and other examples that we'll talk to on the next slide. So the other aspect to talk about is just reminding people the Bland James project, how our community and our leadership tries to work. That was really a single replacement project for Center School. We worked with the MSBA, which is a state funding body, to say, look, your job is to make sure buildings meet or help us as communities that our buildings are kept current, that they are appropriate for educational, and they give you a lot of money to fund that. And our leadership then parlayed a single school replacement into replacing 3 old schools into this one Bland James, and they gave us over $34 million, if I remember correct, to help us pay for it. So we consistently, as a community and town leadership, thank you, and school leadership, look for ways to make our dollar go farther. And I think that's just another good example of doing If you have questions about the debt versus operational override, please, we can answer them afterwards. There are people here, Connor being amongst them, that are incredibly adept at explaining the differences between them. But that's the fundamental. I spoke a little bit about this. Fundamentally, our cost inflation is more than 2.5%. It's not caused by overspending. I can look you all in the eye and say that. We have looked at a comparative set of communities that are around us, communities that are identified by state organizations that are comparable, like DART, for example, is a school comparable set that we have to measure ourselves against. We looked at communities that had the same residential split, commercial split. We looked at communities that had the same number of people. We looked at communities that had similar number of per capita income. We looked at it every which way so we could come to you with conclusions to let you know we've done the research. That our town spend is $4,166 per resident, and that's $405 or 9% less than the state average. That's worth $10 million if you do the math of the difference between that times per capita. Around our 8 comparable communities, it's the lowest, and it's the second lowest spend amongst our surrounding communities. So again, we just try to say, who are we? How much do we spend? Are we spending too much? And we have not been able to say yes to that. The reality is we run lean and we do more with less on a consistent basis across every department, not just 1 or 2. Every department runs less across those comparable sets. On the school side, it's even larger. We spend $16,635 per pupil. That's just short of $3,500 or 17% less than the state average. That would be $12 million more in revenue if we spent to the state average. We are the second lowest spend amongst our surrounding communities. Couple things. One, first, we are okay that we are efficient. We want you to know that. We are okay that we run lean, that we do less with more. That's okay. I don't know if that's New England Yankee thrift, but we're not looking to be the top one in the category. But we are being thoughtful that being too far behind has a material and potentially negative impact on the programs and services that we get to offer to the community. So that's the thought there. You may say, look, if 85% of your spend is people, and that's pretty much if we make an adjustment where the impact will be felt, do we have too many people? That is not the case. This is public, there are comparisons that we did, whether it was the police or fire chief, looked at staffing levels, we looked at school staffing levels, we compared school administration staffing levels, we look at number of teachers per students. All of the data points say we do not have too many people. We run lean on all of those statistics. Whether it's we run with less lieutenants than other people do, which means our single lieutenant has to do more, or we have to push down that responsibility, but we run lean across staffing levels as well. So this isn't just we have too many people. That is absolutely not the case. The difficult challenge that we find ourselves in is that when we're full people and there isn't other locations to go and make adjustments to, when you do have utilities, healthcare costs, transportation, repair and maintenance costs that continue to rise at such a fast rate, we have no flex left. And that's really what brought us here. For a lot of you folks, this might be the first time that you're either hearing about the budget, hearing about information. It might be jarring, and that's okay. Honestly, the fact that you're here means that we can engage, we can educate, we can share. But I can assure you that the costs up there have also been worked. We changed our healthcare to the GIC so that we could get benefit years ago. We saved hundreds of thousands of dollars for those beginning years. We installed LED lighting. We have at our fire department somebody who does the repairs on our trucks, and we outsource that person's technical capability to other towns so we can repair their trucks and get some extra revenue. We bought an ambulance from Texas because we're in a national purchasing consortium that gives us great value. So we are shaking trees. The leadership of our community are shaking trees, getting creative, doing the best that they can to always continue to provide the level of services and programs that we have currently. Then on the next slide, I do also want to say that the committee is without doubt human-oriented about this challenge. And when I say human-oriented, I have to just be clear, we know we are talking potentially about people that are in this room and their employment. And that's important. That's personal. That impacts them, their family. We know that. And we appreciate them letting us have these open conversations, because I'm sure it's not easy or comfortable for them. The flip side is we also know there's a human side that if we do go on operational override, there are absolutely people that are concerned and nervous because they can't afford to pay more. That's a real challenge. That is the crux of why PASE, I believe, was formed, why it's resident-led, and why we're engaging with you. Because the solution is difficult, and no matter which way we go, people will be impacted. So we want to be transparent. When people come around and say, my tax bill is elevated, it's high, yes. Easton has the second highest tax bill, $8,859, typo, I did that, of all of our surrounding towns. So that person is not wrong. You are absolutely correct. There's a couple things you need to keep in mind. One, taxes are a function of how much your house costs and is valued at. And fortunately, Easton has the second highest average home value at $710,000. So that's a good thing. Probably not second highest tax in and of itself is a tough statement. But when you put it in the context that we also have the third highest average income per capita at $65,000, that's the second to last column, that's a good thing. So on average, our homes are higher than most, and we make, on average, more money than most. That's a decent thing. So when you look at our tax bill as a percent of our home value, we're right in the middle of the pack at 13.6%. That's the last column there on the percentage. And if you look at the tax bill as a percentage of income, we're the second lowest. So again, there are ways to look at your tax bill to understand it, but we want to be very transparent because this will have an impact. Next slide, please. How much would an override of $7.2 million impact you by? So the median home value in Easton is about $648,000, so that's the middle of the pack. That would be about $66 a month or $790 annually. The average, as I mentioned, for our community is $710,000, and that would be an $866 annual bill or $72 a month. Every million is about $111 is the way to look at it just in terms of making it digestible for you. It's meaningful, it's impactful. The Easton's average tax bill, so what we wanted to do here was to make sure we included all the impacts, because last year we did do a very impactful debt exclusion override that's going to be rolling in. So on the average single family home at $710,000, the current average tax bill is $88.59. When we add in, if we do an operational override impact, the middle school debt rolling off, some maybe small part of the public safety project, it goes to $10,364. In 2027, the full safety project is embedded. It's $11,017. And then in 2028, you can see it goes up more moderately. It's the 2.5% annual increase, roughly. That takes you to $11,330. So for a couple of years, it's a meaningful increase. There's no doubt about it. Do you mind going back one slide? I just want to try to miss anything. Got it. Yep. Then just the exclusion that in the timing of big projects doesn't always work perfectly, right? So we bond projects like the public safety works when we know we're ready to start it. So that's just letting you know that to a degree, there's some movement between, if it's not this year, it might be next type thing. We, as residents, Easton as a community and a town, has done a great job at trying to support those people that are challenged financially. And that's what this slide tries to educate you about. First of all, there are state programs, statutory programs, for like Chapter 115, where we provide financial aid to veterans and dependents. That's about $200,000. There are statutory state exemptions, so qualified seniors, veterans, individuals with disabilities, we give another $235,000 for. We have a taxation aid committee that we founded in 2020. So these are local programs that we as residents of Easton supported, and we do each year to try to help people that need it. We have a taxation aid committee for seniors 60 plus or individuals with disabilities. We expended $328,000 through 2024 and another $89,000 through 26. We have the SERVES program, supporting emergency relief for veterans in Easton. That also came on board in 2020. Veterans and surviving spouses have an added benefit above the Veteran Discretionary Fund. In 2021 through 2024, that was worth $100,000, an additional $100,000 through 26. We do have a tax work-off program, so senior and veterans can work with the town for a certain amount of money and again, we've dedicated $50,000 to $75,000 for that. Next up, so these are local programs unique to Easton, and I just give credit for our leadership coming up with these ideas. So this is FY 26 through 28, the local circuit breaker match program. So this passed with the building program that we supported. So as we increased taxes, we came up with an innovative program to offset the tax increases for those seniors who receive the Massachusetts circuit breaker income tax. And that's estimated to be about $150,000 and looks to be estimated to start in July of 2025. So whether or not you knew it, we have been doing these things, and they have been embedded and public in our budget presentations. We just may not have thought about all of the items being put in one place to show what we're trying to do to be thoughtful for those people that may not be, that might be financially challenged. Lastly, there are community-wide financial relief programs. One is the Septic Betterment Loan Program. That's a program that gives low rates for septic repairs, about $415,000. And then lastly, I'm not sure people remember this, but if you all recall, our town participated in an energy aggregation program. Raise your hands for people that were aware of this, if you don't mind. Good, decent. Plenty enough that aren't. If you aren't aware of this, you certainly don't know then that in 2020, when the town agreed to buy supply in bulk, that we have saved over $2.6 million directly to our residents each year. That's about 11 plus million, if I remember correctly. And therefore, each home has saved in electrical costs since 2020, on average $1,840. And that was a program where we agreed to buy electricity in bulk, and everybody switched over to this supply automatically, right at a time when the following year electrical rates took off. So we were very, very fortunate. And we're still saving some now, but nowhere, we really saved in the first 2 or 3 years of that program. So again, the people up here, what I'm trying to share, work really hard to justify every dollar that we give them. They look at it as a precious investment to continue to provide services and programs to us, and they always look for opportunities to give back to us as well, on average. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Tom. We're almost ready to close on this and take some questions from you, but I also wanted to mention that very typical with an override proposal that a town might encounter, there are companies that something called a letter of commitment or a memorandum of understanding, and that gets signed by numerous parties in town and committees that it would impact. And this is something that PASE is studying right now, so we don't have these set yet. But they could include a number of things that would give the residents some insurance about what is happening in the near future. They could include things like a commitment that there's no debt exclusion or operational override for some number of years, or that there will be some minimum impact to seniors or other folks with an income challenge, like the kind of things that Tom just outlined. Or that there'll be a commitment for new growth. Last year we were so lucky to have in Easton the largest figure of revenue that came from our new growth, and we hope that that continues. And then we will also maintain healthy reserves in order to keep our bond rating favorable. Otherwise, these projects that we do encounter can cost the town more money. So in closing, here's the summary of the numbers that we've already talked about: an $8 million challenge, PASE's consensus, $7.2 million override, and a $0.8 million expense side solution. We really appreciate your coming and hope that we'll have some good engagement and good dialogue with questions. And if you forget a question or you're watching on ECAT and did not have an opportunity to be here this evening, these are the things that have been set up so far. Please feel free to take a picture with your phone. I'll step back so you don't get me. And these will also be on our website. But from venues similar to this, where there'll be questions and answered with the town administrator, with the school superintendent, with me and Tom, as well as more smaller venues like opportunities at the Ames Free Library or Dunkin' Donuts or specific committee meetings. So this is just March, and I can see this going on through April with many other things as well. So please tell your neighbors, or if you think of a question or have a comment, please feel free to come to one of these and continue to talk with us.
So before I get started on the closing Q&A, one of the things I do want to point out, you didn't probably realize, but by coming here tonight, you've all effectively joined the PASE committee. So welcome to the committee. And the reason why I say that is this is absolutely a resident challenge. We need you to tell your friends. We need you to make sure that you try to attend events, that you continue to stay educated. If everybody in here just told 10 people, we would have more people than probably have attended our town meetings on average for the last 5 years. So please, this will not be decided by 19 people, town leadership, or school leadership, and the answer is theirs. It's not. I am effectively sharing ownership with you, the residents. It is your vote in May of 2025 that will decide what we value, what we want to spend our money on, what we want to support. And whatever way that falls, honestly, I've been doing this for a long enough time to absolutely respect that. But what I don't want to have happen is somebody makes a vote and isn't as informed as they could be. They didn't have all the information or the knowledge. They had faulty assumptions. They just assumed that there was savings and they'll find it and they'll cut it, and they always do. I can assure you there was a statistic earlier in the presentation that we glossed over a little bit. But the last time we had a budget challenge, $2.5 million was roughly 26 positions.
Yes.
We have an $8 million problem. So we're not talking 1 or 2 people. We're talking dozens of people, of professionals that teach, that take care of our roads, that staff police and fire. And if you want to understand what that impact is to programs and services, you should look at Monday's select board recording on ECAT, and you should hear directly from the police chief and the fire chief about the high level of concern that they have for the challenges that will be coming their way due to the budget cuts they're already identifying. They will be putting forth a budget that balances with no override. They have to. I just want you to understand that. So when we solve our budget problem, please know it will come with a large amount of reductions, and they have to. That's their job. They have to balance the budget. We, as PASE, can help them recommend an alternative budget that the residents can support, that includes more revenue, and therefore more employees, and more programs, and more services. So, again, thank you for joining the team very much, and spread the word. We have a month or 2 to get everybody educated, and the PASE committee is doing the best that we can. So if you have a group meeting, if you have a large group of people that you want to talk this situation about, we can give you info. We can try to show up if we can. But we are doing the best that we possibly can to make sure as many people in this community are educated about the challenges we face and what created them. So I know I made us go over, Nancy, so I will take that grief. But we have 30 minutes, if that's okay. It's about 7:15 if I saw my watch correctly. So what we want to do is to open it up if you have questions. There's a microphone there. I'll give this question. If you could just come up, state your name, your address, that would be fantastic so that we have it. Ask your question, and we'll do our best to answer it, or we'll point you in the right direction of the subject matter expert who will be back out in the general area so that you can ask them afterwards about any specific impacts to their apartments. So, is that, want to give that tap? That mic's live.
I'm Gary Frieden from 72 Rand Street. My question is, how confident are you in the $8 million shortfall number? Because with all the effort that will go into an override, is it more conservative, or does it make more sense to ask for a bit more with healthcare inflation, et cetera, going up as quickly as it does?
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much for coming. If you don't mind, I'll start, if that's okay.
Thank you.
So what we try to do is to define as a committee what... Is this on? Yeah. What sustainable meant.
Battery might be dying.
This one working? Perfect. Sustainable for us was largely a 5-year window. So what we did was we took assumptions, thank you to Wendy and to the teams, Andrea, for helping us have models that let us look out 5 years. The reality is that we're making some assumptions. We think that an $8 million override or a $7.2 million override with expense reduction should help us meaningfully get through the next 3 years, where you have some clearer visibility. But when you start to get to years 4 and 5, fundamentally, this is a cycle that, candidly, we should have a discussion every 5 to 8 years, just to start kicking around the fundamental disconnect of most of our revenue increases at a 2.5% rate, and some of our very large expenses are increasing at a much more meaningful rate. To your point, health insurance increased 10% last year, and is projected to increase 11 or 12% this year. It's a big chunk. It impacts our pensions, it impacts a lot. So we are confident. We arrived at it pretty consistently, to be honest, but there's still some risk. So great question. Sir?
Greg Shea, 40 Union Street. Admittedly, this isn't a question, but I just wanted to give a big thank you to this group of people up in front of us. Like, I'm really proud to be part of Easton right now. I haven't seen a committee like this in other communities that are dealing with this, so the fact that y'all are leaning into community the way you are, taking the bravery to stand up in front of a big group of people like this and talk about overrides, which get people worked up. So thank you. I think you're setting an incredible tone, and I'm looking forward to Easton being a model in terms of like coming together as a community to solve this problem instead of falling into divisiveness and freakouts.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much, sir.
From 39 East Street. My question is it kind of relates back to the first question that was asked. Has the committee thought about what happens after we've heard a lot about the override and why it's important, and I think Katie's laid out an argument for it, but what happens after we do the override? Because a lot of the issues that you guys have talked about, it comes from a much larger global viewpoint, and we live in a complex world, so what happens next?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you want me to stay on the spot? Sure. I can keep doing. You can just knock me over and take the mic and everything.
You know I'm not shy.
It's a great question. So I've been doing planning for organizations and companies for 20 years, and the challenge that you always have is at a point in time, you have a very specific set of expectations and variables that you try to assign value with confidence to, and they change. You know, you do the old adage in my line of work is you do a budget today and it's wrong tomorrow. That said, you have 19 people up here. You have teachers with 20 plus years of experience. You have corporate professionals, finance professionals, leaders of our town that are respected and called for their opinion on how we go about and do things. So the degree of confidence that we have that this is the number for right now is very high. We are very much aligned around the spread. When you ask 19 different people and they come back with a spread somewhere between low 7s and 8, that's a really tight range of numbers, which is great. It means everybody consumed the information the same way, they felt confident in what their opinion was, and they had enough information to make that decision. So that's good. I think we have to have this conversation as a community every 5 years. You have to start that process to say, is what we are doing and investing in the right thing? I'll be honest, some other towns and cities have it much more difficult than us. They have a lot more ancillary programs. They have a lot more spend that isn't related directly to programs or people, and/or they have opportunities for a lot more, I guess the word divisiveness, or different viewpoints to factor into it. It's real clear for us where we spend our money. For the schools, 83 cents of every dollar goes to people, And then when you look at the next spend, it's 6% for special education, which is state mandated that you have to. Then you look at the next spend, it's 3% for bus transportation. We outsourced that to save money, a couple of years back. So after that, it's 1% for textbooks, utilities, R&M. There just isn't a lot of discretionary spend. So I think it's a fair question. What happens next is, and we've said this publicly, that our leadership still has to do work. They will have to work every single year, because the reality is we are a residential forward community with 1/3 of its town protected from tax. And candidly, most people like that. That's the number one thing that people value. So we have to continue to be nimble, we have to continue to be quick, we have to continue to find ways to drive more revenue. That letter of commitment that Nancy spoke to is really important. That's what we're gonna start working on next. But I can assure you, there's an overwhelming belief on PACE. We need to go and look at our planning and zoning laws and our conservation laws. Is it good that they're more restrictive than the state? Obviously, Easton is highly desirable. So we have created a great asset. But maybe there are things we can adjust without losing the qualities that make Easton unique and still find ways to encourage new growth. But please remember, Avalon is our largest taxpayer. There are a lot of people that do not want an Avalon in Easton. I'm not judging them. I'm just letting you know the inherent conflict that we have as a community. So that's where thoughtful growth comes into place. We have to get new growth. We're building sewer districts. We're doing things that get us in the game, including recently Brockton agreement to connect our industrial park to sewer, so that hopefully we can attract more industry in the industrial park, helping us to get more revenue that enables us to preserve the rest of Easton the way we like it, if that makes sense. Sir, and if I didn't answer your question, please just find me afterwards.
I was just going to just add one thing to that. Just one thing that I would also add is continued advocacy at the state level to try to adjust not only the Chapter 70 funding, but state aid, and I hope to see a lot more of that with the number of districts that are now in our situation. It's already happened. We spend a lot of time at the State House, our professionals, trying to address that, but that is a huge issue, making sure that Easton gets what's necessary from the state. So thank you for that question. Sir.
I read the two budgets put out by Mr. Reed. Great job. I loved your comments. It's obvious that the town knew over the last few years that we've got to get here. But we are here. I'm just curious about the school we just sold on Center Street. The Center Street School, I'm sorry. I haven't been able to find on Mr. Reed's information where the money, the proceeds went.
Yeah, it actually hasn't been sold yet. What we did.
4 years now?
Pardon?
4 years since we've been getting rid of that school.
Well, you're right. We've been trying to make sure we sell it. The residents put a restriction on how we could sell it and what it could be used for. And just last year at the town meeting, we changed the zoning at the center school so that we could have a person who showed interest. Their plan was to put in recreational fields, like a 4Kicks, I guess I call it, sports complex. So that's moving forward. The estimated benefit of that, is there an estimated sale price out there yet? I don't think there is. Sorry.
I don't have it offhand. It was a low single-digit million. What Tom's referring to is last November, we needed to update the zoning through town meeting. Only town meeting can authorize that for center school to be sold. We can't do direct sales of public property, which is a good thing. I don't think any of you would want me to be able to do that. It had to be zoned that way, and then we had to go through a public process to invite bids. So that has a contingent purchase and sale that we're negotiating, but it's not finalized. We did the same process in Rural Hall. Voters authorized selling that. We did put that on the market. That did sell. Stonewall College did buy it for $2.3 million.
But we're also just separating the skating rink in November after 4 years.
No, the skating rink was.
The Easton Town Riot put it.
I'm not sure I read that article, but I can tell you that when we were looking for that property and how to treat it, it was a very passionate plea from the residents that carved out that particular rink, and therefore it's now a separate entity, so that it can't be developed, given it's one of the things that people in Easton truly value. I do want to give context. The Moreau Hall is a good example for how much selling our buildings could help us. It was 2.3 million, and we're talking about, and that was a one-time, and we're talking about an $8 million functional challenge each year. The other aspects to remind ourselves of that we have made decisions about revenue opportunities that reflect, again, the will of Easton. One example was allowing marijuana facilities into our town. That was about $650,000 of estimated revenue each year. I'm not saying that was right or wrong. I'm saying the decisions we as residents make actually does have an impact, and they reflect our values. So hopefully that answered your question about those two buildings.
No, it doesn't, because we still don't have enough for sale.
We're negotiating the sale with a private party, so we can't share the details of that negotiation, but they're working through a purchase and sale. And just so that people,
We haven't got the purchase and sale.
it hasn't been completed yet. Hopefully things look good. There are a couple of Easton people that are looking to build there, so it would be fantastic. The other aspect that would be nice, it takes off an incredibly large amount of the demolition that needs to happen in a sensitive way, given the age of the building and the materials that are in it. So they're taking that on.
But my concern, it's been vacant for two years,
Yeah.
and we're paying the, whatever cost it is, just to keep the thing running.
Yeah, it's been on the market for all of that time. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Rachel Moore, 541 Foundry. I'm just wondering, the .8 million that is slated for cuts, what is falling under that?
Good question. Our recommendation is roughly how much should we raise and where should it come from? And so what the .8 reflects is the average of all of the responses. Overwhelmingly, most of the PASE committee members all felt strongly that it was a large amount from the revenue side, given how lean we are on the expense side. Expense reductions, that's the work for the school superintendent and the town administrator, as they go through their budget to identify what programs makes sense in terms of reductions or savings. Now remember, they're going to do a budget that effectively reduces all of the millions of dollars to get down to flat. They cannot assume any operational override. So they will have a budget that reduces all the way down. Then, we are going to put forth a second budget for consideration. That's where they will add back the items that they believe are most important. And the net, in this case, it says it's $800,000, but that's for them to solve. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie Thayer, 110 Summer Street. A couple of things. Do we have that slide that goes back to talk about our senior and veterans programs?
Sure.
Because my concern is I just moved here in 2020, all right? So I wasn't here with all these other overrides. I understand that operational overrides cannot go towards the debt. I understand that. However, in the real world, if I can't afford something that I planned on, I kind of put a stop to it and maybe not proceed, because having the one tax levy for the school and then rolling into this one and then looking at operational override, I think if we have to choose between another tax levy and an override, or one or the other, I think is a little bit more palatable to myself, absolutely. But then also looking at these programs and how much financial aid we give to veterans and dependents for qualified seniors. I'm just a couple years short of that senior, and if we keep going the way we're going, I'm gonna need those services. And I'm sure there's a lot of us in here who are gonna need those services if we get taxed out based on our property value. And it's great and wonderful that, it looks pretty, but how much is a tree worth versus the livelihood of someone who works in this town?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking at. And as far as the services are concerned, if the town really wants and the residents really want us to stay the way that we are and maintain our values, and we have to cut services, then maybe we need to look at auxiliary, volunteer, example, let's say there's a senior center, and we need to cut people who staff it. Okay, well, let's look at the volunteers to come in and offer those same services, put our money where our mouth is, and if we want to not pay it out of our pocket, pay it with our time.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you. So look, there's no doubt that there is a real impact. Yeah, there's no doubt that there's a real impact. The public safety project, we voted for that. It's the right thing in terms of what we all voted for last year to do. And we have a separate operational challenge. There is a human side to this. You're absolutely right that of taxes that will be increased for the community that we live in. I can assure you, we spend, as I said, and we have all of the charts if you want to see them after, we spend less already than most. We rely on volunteers a lot. People who lead teams, coaches, whether it's organizations in the Lions Club. There's a tremendous amount of civic pride in Easton, as evidenced by the turnout tonight, candidly. Especially the civil nature of it. People are genuinely here to be curious and not judgmental. And yeah, that question of affordability is exactly what every single person in this room will decide for themselves at that vote. We just want to make sure that you understand what will happen. That's okay. When you leave here, and I appreciate that we were talking about maybe you don't spend it. I get that. But there are things here that are at play that are beyond our control. There are. I need you to please go, and I'm just talking to the lady who asked the question, but I'm asking all of you. Please, go talk to Chief Boone and make sure you understand from him how services for police will be cut, what response times will look like with Chief Alexander, and just make sure you know that. You're still not right or wrong regardless of how you vote. I mean that sincerely. I've come to deeply respect the town meeting, having been a participant of it for this many years. But just make sure you look in their eyes so that you can see that our services and our time of response for emergency services will be impacted. Just make sure you know the truth, the reality of that. Still, I'm not saying you should change your vote. I just need to make sure you feel that. Because if you don't feel it, I didn't do my job. When you have a chief who says, our police station may go dark at night, and that would be embarrassing for me. Somebody couldn't come into my police station at a time of need, and they don't have a service that they want. It's not because he wants to do that, it's because he has to make those tough calls. He has to make those cuts. And that's a very difficult thing for somebody who wakes up every day, passionately believing in providing a safe and protective environment for every person, every resident in his community. But just make sure you talk to him about that. That's why they're here. Make it real. That's all I ask. Make it real. Make it as real for the person who can't afford to pay it as for the person who has to look at their staff and say, we'll have less and we won't be able to do more because we can't get the same level of services. And as long as you all say, heard, thank you, asked my questions, felt it from them live, then I did my job, and how you vote in May that's exactly how the New England Town Meeting works. But I'll be here every day. Our team will be here every day. Nancy will be here every day. We'll have coffee at Fridays at Dunkin', so that if you have a question and we can make it more real, we're committed to do that. I'm not sure I answered I'm not sure I answered you directly, but I appreciate you asking it and bringing that up, because that is absolutely important.
I will be following up with you.
Perfect, I appreciate that. Go for it. Actually,
I'm back a second, everybody.
yes.
We had a reassessment going according to former assessor. What happened to that?
We did do the reassessment.
Reassessment?
Yes.
Yep.
And so when was that completed?
When was that completed?
Last fall.
Yeah, it was last fall.
Last fall.
Yeah.
So is it already take effect?
It has, but just remember, the important thing is that no matter what happens, your tax levy can only go up by 2.5%.
Understand.
So if 100 people had assessment increases, everybody gets reduced because you can only go up by 2.5%. But it impacts some people, that's for sure.
A couple of years ago, me and the assessor had a long talk.
Gotcha. Thank you.
He said, I'll take care of you, and he gave me $250.
Sir.
Hi, John Rooney, Pleasant Heights Drive. I've been a resident for 28 years in Easton. I've had 4 kids go through the school system. I've got 5 grandkids, 3 go to school right here. And to me, the most important thing about Easton is really 2 things. It's the education system that we provide for our kids. And that we have that fully funded, the right number of teachers, the right administrators, to do a good job because the kids are our future, right? And that's what we want to make sure are well taken care of and well educated. The second thing to me, especially in this day and age, is safety, public safety. Now, I have a son who's on the police department. I know and I hear stories about how tight things are, how hard they work, and how important it is in this day and age that we fund public safety, both fire, police, and DPW. And it's incredibly important. It's hard with the amount of money we're asking residents to pay now. We've had last year and this year with this proposal. And I'm the fiscal hawk, and I like Elon Musk. I think we want to be as tight as we possibly can. I think this team has done that. Over the years, 28 years, I've gone to these town meetings, and I've seen what the leadership has done. This is the best leadership we've had in this town in the 28 years that I've been a resident, by far. They know what they're doing. They're very conservative in terms of fiscal stuff, and we want to make sure that education and public safety is paramount.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You know, I just want to piggyback on to that, and thank you so much for the comments. We may say we spend less. I want to make sure you know that that doesn't mean we're giving less quality services, less educational experiences. And just one data point that I think shows it, we may spend less than a lot of our peers, most of them, but we still have a high school that rated 35th in the entire state of 351. So we genuinely do more with less. I think that's okay. As somebody who looks to get value and a return on their spend, that's exactly what I want. I'd like to spend less and continue to outperform and give our kids and residents the best experiences we can possibly give them. So thank you again for the comments.
Hi, I'm Leah Pepper. I've lived in Easton for 20 years. I agree 100% with you. I'm not sure, is this working? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I have twins that went through the school system. One was special ed, and he needed those services desperately. They've graduated, one from OA, one had to go to boarding school for services. And we moved. Our neighborhood was very young when we moved here, so we downsized when they went to college. Since then, we have 4 neighbors, 4 different families that we abut that are retired. They sent their kids through the school systems. They've been retired, some of them for a little bit of longer time, some with illnesses. And I agree with everything you said. I use all the services in town. I kind of want to be a kid again. I think it's great, the ice skating rink. Everything that this town offers is so important to all of us. I so worry about our elderly. My neighbors, there's 4 of them, that abut our property, and they're at a different stage in life. They're not getting the increases they don't work. They're not getting the increases of what, for food, for gas, for anything to live. So I don't think this is gonna help them. Do I agree with everything you're saying in terms of the public services? Every policeman I said, you can ask anyone I see in this town, fireman, I always thank them. I know they do, their work is incredibly important, but what about our elderly? What are we doing for them? I don't know how we separate taxes so that we can make sure, a tax bracket. I know there's low-income people that live in this town, and I appreciate that too. But how about the elderly that have no resources to make more income? How do we take care of them? And I agree with you back there. Community service, like with the Easton Day, we're always picking up trash. We're on 138, risking our lives to make sure this town looks beautiful. We can all do a part, but what can we do for the elderly? Because we're gonna get there. We're all gonna get there someday.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna be able to afford it.
No, you're absolutely right. Thank you. So going to ask your help, because if you haven't asked 4 of them if they are taking any of the benefits that our town offers, now you know. And so spread the word. So I just ask you to do that. So because if they're not, and they didn't know about them, and candidly, it's so easy for us to live in a community or a town or a city and not really know. Whether it's I get up, I go to work, I'm at work at my desk at 7:30, I get home from 7:30, I'm in the city, 2 kids, they gotta go to softball, one's gotta go to soccer. Life is busy. It is genuinely hard at times to engage in a town level, local level, and to help move the dial. But for anybody that's out there on a fixed income and doesn't partake in these programs that we've created as residents, but again, I give credit to the leadership for a lot of the ideas. You know, several years back, we actually enabled people to donate their money into a fund to defray those people's costs that are on fixed incomes. I don't know if you've all donated, but it would help. Like, and I'm a resident, so I'm gonna say this, but if you really wanna help, put money into that fund. And that way we can help our neighbors. We can make them aware of programs and that information. Nancy walking over either means I'm talking too much or she wants to say something.
But thank you so much for that comment. I have so many friends in town who are in such a similar situation. And the other thing I can say for folks in that situation, in addition to making sure that you are taking advantage of these things and that we are helping them as best we can, is they have a say in their vote as well. And that means not only in this issue, but when there are projects in town that have an opportunity for increased revenue, that they are supporting those, I vote. And that's always been the, you know, sort of the challenge in Easton. I think Taco Bell was a very controversial issue, if I remember, and, you know, so many other things, Avalon, and so many of those things, that we have to make a choice between supporting those programs to help grow revenue, so that we are helping everyone. So thank you so much for those comments.
Yeah. So now, if we could, just the subject matter experts in the other room with your awesome Did You Know signs, if you could head back, that would be great. If you folks as residents want to go back after you've heard what we've said and talk to the chief or talk to DPW and ask them those questions about what does this really mean, let them make it real for you. And please challenge them, because we'll get better with this one. So thank you all so much. Honestly, thank you.